Welcome everyone again. It is my pleasure to have you all here. My name is Maria Midon, and I will be guiding you through today's webinar, which is part of the series Time ToBe Blooming, a Spring in Sustainable Wellbeing. Is hosted by the Horizon Europe 2B research project. Tuuli, our coordinator, will later introduce the project to us. This month, we celebrate 1 year since the beginning of the project activities. And this webinar is an excellent opportunity to spread the message of 2B, but also to start sharing some of the research that is already going on within the project. This series will tackle the introduction to the concept of sustainable well-being, but also contextualize the sustainable well-being within the EU context, as well as discussing local approaches around the world. It's a 3-session webinar, and in this first one, we want to discuss the concept of sustainable well-being and its potential implications. If you're here, I know that you're at least curious of the idea of alternative economic models. And as S2B, we believe that the economic paradigm that is based on growth is detrimental to both the planet and our collective well-being. Therefore, we're working towards the goal of facilitating a sustainable transformation towards an economy that centers our well-being within planetary boundaries. During today's webinar, we will try to define the difficult job of defining what is sustainable well-being, as well as discovering that sustainable well-being does not mean an unfulfilling life, and how can sustainable well-being be integrated in the economy. Firstly, with the hard job of defining sustainable well-being, it is my pleasure to introduce Tuuli Hirvilammi. She's a senior researcher fellow at the University of Tampere, specializing in sustainable well-being, eco-welfare states, eco-social policies, welfare theories, degrowth, and ecological economics. Tuuli is a researcher in the ORSI project, as well as the coordinator of the Horizon Project 2B. So without further ado, I give you the floor, Tuuli.
Thank you, Maria. Nice to be here. And as mentioned, I will start with first introducing 2B project, and then I will hopefully give some thoughts about alignment towards sustainable well-being with the title Time to Be Well, because we always like to play with this 2B acronym. So Time to Be Well from my side. So 2B research project, as mentioned, we've been running 1 year already. We have 15 organizations from 9 different countries in Europe and also in South America and Africa. And we have 3 broad aims. We want to build a theoretical and empirical understanding of an economy for sustainable well-being. Therefore, we have to understand what we mean with sustainable well-being. We are developing with robust empirical knowledge. We are developing integrated policies, transformative indicators, and a new macroeconomic model. So we are very much focusing on fostering synergies. And then the third goal is to understand how mindsets, indicators, innovations, and policies could better work together towards the sustainability paradigm. So how social, ecological, and environmental goals fit together. And as said, Maria mentioned, we've been working 1 year, and now we published this month the first so-called policy brief from 2B project with title Time to Be Transformative, Strengthening Sustainable Wellbeing and Economic Alternatives. And there you can find this published in our website. But there we also a little bit discuss what is the role of sustainable well-being, or what is important to understand sustainable well-being and what it means, what we mean with that. And we actually kind of promote the idea that instead of sustainable development that is more broad and often not so maybe concretely defined, well-being, sustainable well-being can provide a vision for public policies. And it also therefore informs what kind of impacts are valuable. It's kind of normative understanding of what are the impacts we want to achieve. And then it also can inform what to measure and how to select indicators and policies. So today I will discuss with you and explain and present what we understand with sustainable well-being a little bit. So it's the first very broad idea, of course, is the notion or definition is that it refers to good life for all within planetary boundaries, but we are not happy with that. And actually the first thing that I ask you to pay attention to is this planetary boundaries here. Next, please, Maria. I think the very key in sustainable well-being is a biophysical foundation. So without going or before going deeper into details, what is important for human well-being or what are the indicators or factors related to that, I think it's crucial to understand how we are embedded in biophysical foundation and how different planetary processes such as carbon cycle or hydrological cycle are so crucial for well-being, and how natural resources play a role here as well. Next, please. And here, for example, I show you this figure of ecosystem services framework where this interaction between ecosystems and human well-being is visualized with this kind of one-way arrows. And I think this is very problematic understanding, of course, because we first of all have to understand that the arrows go to the other direction as well, that when we actually try to achieve well-being and improve our well-being, increase it, we of course have impact in ecosystems. But I think the arrows here in between are also problematic in a way that we should actually understand this as more even as a coexistence, that we exist always in and as part of nature. We cannot talk about human well-being without taking into consideration how fully dependent we are on Earth system and ecosystem processes. And in addition to other species and living organisms in this planet, we also are related to other human beings, and we cannot develop as individual beings without some kind of relations that are supporting us in so many ways. So I think this kind of more relational understanding of human well-being is the foundation for sustainable well-being, as we have written together with my Finnish colleague Tuuli Hirvilammi previously. So this is the foundation, biophysical foundation. Next, please. Then when we understand that this is the key in sustainable well-being, and actually the very key why it's sustainable, because we have to save and preserve these biophysical boundaries and the planetary processes for future generations as well. If we hamper them and if we destroy them, of course, we cannot create any preconditions for future generations to be well. Therefore, it's crucial to start with that. But then after, we can start with more nuanced questions and how to conceptualize well-being and what we need for a good life. And of course, these are ancient questions that have been addressed in philosophies and very many different theories. And next, please. There are many theories. And next again. No, sorry, there should come the... Sorry, Maria, okay, go back. Maybe there aren't the figures. Okay, anyway, in ToBe, we have reviewed different theories in sustainable, in well-being research. And for example, self-determination theory comprises human well-being as including 3 different psychological needs: autonomy, relatedness, and competence. And then we have reviewed the human theory of human need by Doyle, Goff, and by Len Doyle and Ian Goff, where they focus on two needs as health and autonomy. And then we also have been inspired by the Finnish sociology Erik Allard and his constellation of having loving being and having doing loving being framework. Anyway, so we have reviewed these different theories, and we've derived to an understanding that in ToBe and in more broader terms, we can approach sustainable well-being as satisfaction of 3 universal needs: health, relatedness, and autonomy. And these are like the key elements of good life, so-called. Of course, we need health, understood as both physical and psychological health. Mental health is crucial, but with the focus on physical health, it brings into the picture of these more material resources that are needed for food, water, subsistence needs, etc. Then relatedness, as mentioned, it's very important, but also crucial for developing and being a human being and a human self. And then autonomy is not about being individual, but it's about not feeling pressure to act in a certain way or that it's more like you can integrate your values and behavior, and also in the end be able to change the cultural values. So the constellation of health, relatedness, and autonomy could be the kind of building blocks for sustainable well-being. And then what comes the next is the focus on more precise need satisfiers. And in ToBe, we also want to emphasize that there is not possible to derive an exact list what are the most important or crucial need satisfiers, but it can be quite open-ended, and it's important to understand that these are also always culturally modified aspirations. So there are, for example, food and protective housing and relationships, social support, education. These are the factors that are often considered in indicators, for example. But it's always important to keep the connection to in between health, relatedness, and autonomy and these need satisfiers in mind, so that we don't risk confusing some kind of consumer goods, for example, as need satisfiers if they don't really then in the end meet the needs. And then how do we achieve these need satisfiers, or how do we provision them? Of course, this refers to policy frameworks and policy programs. And I would say that we already have quite many policy frameworks in place that are important for sustainable well-being. But the problem often is that they are not fully in accordance or aligned with this biophysical foundation. So if you, Maria, press next. The focus on mainstream welfare states, for example, often focus on this human well-being and policies part of this figure, whereas they omit the focus on or the understanding of biophysical foundation, for example, how certain policies or indicators then affect the environmental factors. So if you show what we do in ToBe is that we try to align the kind of process of sustainable well-being from biophysical foundation to policies with new kind of macroeconomic models and integrated policy making, so that whatever we do and whatever policies we adopt, we have to understand how these are interrelated. And this is crucial because currently we are living in a world where we have a very kind of big mismatch between well-being and biophysical boundaries, as you can see from this map, where that have been produced earlier in the University of Leeds. The welfare states with high income and good social achievements and indicators have score well. As you see, the countries with blue colors and dark blue colors, you see that those are the countries that have achieved the kind of high quality of life in these different social indicators, life satisfaction, nutrition, sanitation, income, etc. But if you look at the world map from the other perspective and focus on the biophysical boundaries, you see that the same countries that are scoring high in social indicators are very bad in terms of biophysical boundaries. So this is the mismatch that we have to address, and we try to do that with again the integrated solutions. And we have come up with this framework figure that is a kind of modified notion of donut. Maria, if you go to the next. Okay, this we can skip because time is running. But if we go to this one, the framework picture of ToBe, we try to again illustrate how the well-being can be understood as a safe and just space in between planetary boundaries and kind of shortfall of need satisfaction. And as mentioned, it's crucial to transform the need satisfiers, but here in ToBe we also focus on sufficiency as understood as being kind of in this sustainable space of sustainable well-being. And sufficiency can be understood as a needs-based approach as well, because needs also are satiable. So if you show the next, please, it's between the overconsumption and lack of necessities. But if you try to increase the satisfaction of certain needs up to or above a certain level, it can be also socially harmful or psychologically harmful. So I think also needs theory support the notion of sufficiency. And in sufficiency, if you are interested in sufficiency, I will finish with my presentation by mentioning that in ToBe we have also published a deliverable or short report on sufficiency as a confluence for post-growth streams. This is written by Eloi Laurent from Sciences Po in Paris, and he also provides there a nice and new, maybe a little bit fresh illustration of sufficiency as kind of inspired by the social equator. So if you, Maria, go to the next, you see here the notion of sufficiency corridor. So with certain sufficiency policies, we could try to come and avoid the world where global top 1% of the population take or dominate the use of resources, and bottom billion of population are lacking of well-being, and we should aim towards the sufficiency corridor and stay there. This is the key as well. And this, therefore, also different and new kind of post-growth policies are needed. But I leave it here, and I'm happy to then join and discuss more in the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tuuli, for a very insightful introduction. I remind you that if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to write them in the chat and make sure that we will make sure that we'll answer them, but also during the Q&A session, raise your hand and we will give you the floor as well. Well, now we have heard a lot about sufficiency and the needs to live within planetary boundaries, but such a life does not mean to sacrifice a good, satisfying life. Here to walk us through this concept, we have Orsoyola Lelkes. Orsoyola is independent economist and social scientist, as well as psychological counselor, exploring the idea of leading a thriving life within planetary boundaries. She's a researcher on one of ToBe's sister projects, SPES, and is the author of multiple publications, the latest one being Sustainable Hedonism, a thriving life that does not cost the earth. I give the floor to you, Orsoyola.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. As said, I'm part of the SPES team, the Sustainability Performances, Evidence and Scenarios Horizon Europe project as well. So I'm kind of really pleased about this collaboration and dialogue with the sister projects of ToBe. And in this presentation, I'm going to focus on the inner dimension of transformation, which is an inherent element of achieving a good life within the planetary boundaries. And this is also kind of a key element in our SPES project. So what is the motivation of this talk? We know that happiness is good. I mean, no one would question that. Kind of, we all want to be happy. And we also know from happiness research, there is quite a lot of empirical research on happiness recently, that happy people are healthier, care more about others and the world, so they are more likely to also support a socio-ecological transformation. So it is good to make people happy. On the other hand, we also know that this quest for happiness often fails. Kind of the phenomenon of addiction, overconsumption, and still there are many people who still suffer for various reasons. One of them is climate anxiety recently, and we have collectively a crisis, a climate and ecological and a crisis among us. Next one. So the solution out of this could be kind of refining our understanding of happiness, and the notion I'm going to present is flourishing life. And also kind of refine our strategies, how we seek pleasure and happiness. And I'm going to say more on sustainable hedonism as my proposition. So kind of, what is the kind of misunderstanding of hedonism? Hedonism is also kind of a core notion in economics, because the utility framework is based on the ancient hedonism, but our cultural practice of hedonism seems to be kind of a misunderstanding of this ancient concept, ancient Greek concept. This radical hedonism is a term from Erich Fromm, who said that the ultimate aim of life is the maximum pleasure and the fulfillment of any desire a person may feel. So our simplified 21st century version of hedonism is based on this, and it's actually also kind of based on the inflation of desires. In a consumer society, more consumption is the better, actually increases GDP, and it encourages unrestricted satisfaction by consumption. It's also an egoist enterprise. It's egoist pleasure seeking, and it holds that momentary desire equals real need. So in some economic frameworks, it's respecting preferences is essential. And the challenge is kind of thinking also of sufficiency. What Tuuli was also talking about is that who would opt for minimalism in the world of maximizers, and this economically responsible behaviors is perceived as a loss of happiness and life quality. So of course it creates resistance or even anger. How can we go about it? So this is a mapping of happiness. It's just kind of, I'm not going to go through this whole map. Happiness can be kind of, we can measure it through the body, physical sensations. We can look at emotions, positive and negative emotions. This is what mostly psychologists do. And also kind of look at thoughts, kind of cognitive assessment, what people say about their own lives. And this kind of cognitive assessments have two main streams. Kind of one of them is so-called the hedonic approaches, used by mostly in happiness economics, also as a measure of experience utility. It's like asking people how satisfied are you with your life, or how happy you are. And the other approach is this eudaimonic or approach of flourishing life, which I'm going to focus on here, is kind of much more on the sense of meaning and purpose in life. And this has a renaissance now I would say, for example, now the OECD is also working on new indicators of eudaimonia. So it's an ongoing process. Lots of research in many fields actually addressing this. So what is this flourishing life, and why is it popular now? It's actually one of the approaches of happiness by Aristotle, described in the Nicomachean Ethic. And this word eudaimonia comes from good, and daimon, spirit. And the spirits were in the ancient world the movers in the celestial spheres who moved the planets. So they created order from the chaos. And actually, the activity of the soul was the definition of happiness according to Aristotle. So we also have to create this kind of order in our inner world, as there is order in the outer world. So in this approach, happiness is a conscious choice and action, and the feeling comes as an outcome. And it's very important to kind of focus on virtues, the kind of persistent practice of virtues in the Aristotelian framework. And it's not an egoist or an individualist enterprise, but it's always in the context of community and friendship. So I actively contribute to the happiness of others. So kind of, in some, happiness is not simply what we feel, but rather a result of what we do, how we live. And it's not just Aristotle, so we don't have to go that far back, that it has an extended literature in modern psychology as well. How it is measured, one of the applications is done by the Office of National Statistics in the UK for many years now. And the question is just one single question overall: to what extent do you feel the things you do in your life are worthwhile? And the answers are from a scale of 0 to 10, from not at all to completely. And another illustration is the flourishing scale of Ed Diener and Robert Wiswas-Diener. They kind of much more build on the self-determination theory mentioned earlier. So kind of leading a purposeful, meaningful life, social relationship, actively contributing the happiness, well-being of others, optimist about being optimistic to the future, being respected, and so on. I'm not going to read out the whole dimension. So it's practically answering all these questions on the scale from 1 to 7, with strongly disagree to strongly agree, which adds up to a score of 8, between 8 and 56. So the lowest possible and highest possible score, and the higher you scored, the kind of stronger your flourishing, the higher value you have on the flourishing scale. So this is a kind of a thought experiment you can also just do for yourself. Kind of, where would you think you stand on this scale? And what is kind of, to me, fascinating is this issue of pleasure. Kind of, do we need to then dump it completely and become virtuous and just focus on morale and doing good? Actually, in this framework, pleasure actually has also a place. Although in the Aristotelian framework, it's very important that pleasure is not the ultimate value. It is flourishing life, but it has a place. And I think, and this is why I label this kind of maybe paradoxical word sustainable hedonism, just to invite for self-reflection, and also maybe some just to kind of question the obvious sometimes around us or in us. What is kind of interesting, the kind of most well-known ancient Greek hedonist philosopher is Epicure. And surprisingly, he was not this kind of indulgent hedonist, which many people would associate to. He talked about, for example, the domination of vain and empty desires. He discouraged people from visiting the fairs because they might want to kind of start longing for things they don't really need. Said we must avoid developing wasteful, luxurious demands that can be difficult to satisfy later. And actually, it may sound paradoxical, but actually it's even consistent with the hedonist approach, because if you're longing for things you don't have, it's a suffering. So if you want to maximize actually joy in your life, then it's better just to be free. Actually, it's also about inner freedom and enjoy fully what you have, but not suffering because of what you don't have. And it's also, again, in a kind of context of community. Aristotle made steps kind of emphasizes more that it's a matter of habit, kind of the sources of pleasure. It starts already at childhood, and we also as adults can learn is so-called self-mastery, which is a state which is not self-denial, so it doesn't hurt actually, but it's a kind of balanced inner state, a middle way between asceticism and indulgence. And he also is very much focusing on differentiating between necessary and optional things. So why flourishing life? Is it just kind of nostalgia? I believe that it can be also a kind of key to solving our problems now. It was shown that flourishing life has a number of positive benefits, improving mental health and physical health. It can make us more responsible, collaborative, and ecologically aware, and can inspire voluntary simplicity, environmental and pro-social action. These benefits are actually really significantly larger in case of flourishing life compared to hedonic life. There is also this literature comparing these two strategies. So green adjustments, less consumption can actually lead to more happiness, not less. And it can be a normative approach to personal and collective thriving. So it can help us to move towards this safe consumption space outlined earlier, and it can be supported by public policies. And so this flourishing life is a life kind of that doesn't harm oneself, others, or the earth. In a sense, it can be called sustainable well-being because it is sustainable and it is a measure of well-being. But I would say that an integrated approach of sustainable well-being includes additional aspects as well. Chance for all to flourish, like meeting basic needs, creating opportunities, societal well-being, ecological well-being. And finally, I will mention our SPES framework, which is also kind of offering an approach to sustainable well-being. We call it sustainable human development, and focus on 5 pillars of productivity, equity, sustainability, participation and empowerment, human security. So it's also kind of an approach of human flourishing together with understanding the current context of economic growth and sustainability. So kind of lots of actually overlaps with the ToBe objective. And we have a number of really exciting papers already out on our website. We work with indicators, we work with kind of analyzing past and current and future policy scenarios. So it's lots of things happening and it's still ongoing. Thank you very much. I stop here. Yeah, and this is the book which where you can read much more about the ideas I talked about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ursula. That was extremely interesting, and I cannot wait to hear what the discussion raises with this topic. I'm going to move on to our last speaker. Now that we understand a little bit more about sustainable well-being, I imagine that the question most of us have is how does it fit into economic theory, but more importantly, what dilemmas does it create into the future economic thinking? We have tasked Philippe Roman with the difficult job of tackling these questions. He's a researcher and professor at ISEC, a business management school in Brussels. He specializes in ecological economy, and he's a researcher at the ToBe project, where he focuses on alternative economic indicators. So without further ado, I give you the floor, Philippe.
Thank you very much, Maria. Thanks for inviting me and for giving me the opportunity to share some thoughts on sustainable well-being from the perspective of an ecological economist. So my presentation is based on mostly ongoing reflections, more open question than closed results. I will not present directly the results obtained through the ToBe project and the task we, myself and my teammate Fanny Detier, have in this project, because these results will be consolidated and published by next summer as a deliverable. So I entitled my presentation, "How could sustainable well-being shape the econ?" So not only the economy, but also economics. I think that both come and go together, hand in hand, through various retroactions and performativity. So I would like to raise a question of how to maybe change economics and the economy at the same time. Next slide, please. So these are well, the main sources of the thinking I present today. So first, working on the epistemology of sustainability indicators with a colleague of mine, and then implementing a donut approach, especially focusing on documenting broad-based indicators, social well-being and sustainability indicators for Brussels. This is a project you can find information about on the following website, Brussels Donut Project, and the research carried out within the ToBe research project that Tuuli has presented very well beforehand. Next, please. So the question I will be asking is, what is required from econ to be at the service of sustainable well-being? So to be at the service means really that economics and the economy should change its normativity, should change its purpose, its goal. And so the point maybe is to develop more economics for. You hardly find in the economics literature economics for this or economics for that. You may find economics of instead of economics for. So I think that we need to rethink both the ontology, the epistemology, but also the normativity of economics to think in this direction. So to think of the desirable properties of economic systems in a world where our shared goals revolve around flourishing, shared prosperity, sustainability, and are not overly financial or economic. So it requires thinking the economy as embedded, as a complex web of actions and actors, cutting across spheres of life, and at the same time rethinking economics from a dominant and imperialistic discipline to like an endeavor that is more humble, let's say, more conciliant, more pluralistic, non-imperialistic, etc. Next, please. So ontologically rethinking the economy and epistemologically rethinking economics and the normativity in policy making. So thinking of sustainability, well-being indicator initiatives and all the policy processes that can help changing this normativity and well-being and sustainability goals and indicators, not just an afterthought or a side concern, what they tend to be in many indicator beyond GDP indicator initiatives nowadays. Next, please. So, as I just said, well, economics has long had a complicated relationship with the other social sciences and the humanities, with a tendency, a persistent tendency to claim superiority, as if the tremendous development of the economic sphere since the 19th century were to be accompanied by a growing domination of the discipline of economics. And that has been very well documented for many years now. And this state of affairs is unfortunate. So the economic or financial spheres and the discipline of economics should probably retreat to more humble quarters, from economic imperialism to more pluralistic studies of economic systems under a variety of contested assumptions. Well, this is the point of pluralism, and a variety of normative goals, among which sustainable well-being, with a variety of implementations of this horizon, of this broad goal. Next, please. So this this move has surely to do with the very ontology of the economy. So the economy as a subsystem, or the economy as an embedded sphere of reality, which is also a reflection of normative hierarchy in the spheres of our human lives. Do we want, first and foremost, efficient economies because we want to reach our non-economic goals best, or do we value efficiency for itself, for its own sake? So this is exactly the point of putting the economy at its place. And I think that all the debate around beyond GDP should, as much as thinking of how to complement GDP, how to think different GDP, how to green GDP, probably should focus on how to put GDP at its right place, its limited place, and so come back to its sphere of relevance, I would say. So the economy as a thing, as a sphere of reality, but also GDP as an indicator, gross domestic product, and all other economic performance goals, needs to be embedded into larger frameworks. And sustainable well-being framework could be one of these. Next, please. So here are, a few of the proposals that you can find in the ecological economics literature, recent ecological economics literature, on how to rethink the economy and how to rethink economics through, for example, the concept of provisioning systems and the concept of appropriating systems, and the economy, the difference between oikonomia and climatique. And all of this, I think that the open question is, to what extent should these reconceptualizations shape not only academic thinking, but also institutional practice or indicator dashboards? So this is a real challenge, because our present dashboards, the present way we construct our data, especially our economic data or socio-economic data, is not exactly oriented toward these views of the economy. So are we able to reshape the way we present data, we display them, we calculate indicators and indexes, following these alternative views of the economy that differ quite drastically from the introductory textbook in economics. Next, please.
Philippe, I'm sorry, we hear you a little bit weird with some echo. Can you try muting and unmuting yourself for a second, see if it fixes?
Is it better now?
I mean, we still hear it. It's not too distracting, I don't think, but maybe let's see if it gets worse.
I'm sorry. don't know exactly
No
what I
worries.
can improve this. But...
No, I mean, like I said, it's not very distracting for the moment, but I will let you know if it gets any worse.
Okay, thank you. Can you move to the next slide, please? Yeah. So a few words about what you can go next, please. A few words about this idea of normativity and the link with policy making, and just a reminder that indicators in general and sustainability well-being indicators in particular are not in a social, in cultural, political vacuum. They are political choices, social political choices. They are ethical choices as much as the technical choices. And so there is, I think, a challenge in reminding all the time that it's not just about choosing the best indicator between A and B, or what indicator has the most, like, is the most impactful, or brings the most information, etc. But also its legitimacy, and well, its endorsement by a broad-based democratic process. So it's not just a matter of complementing GDP or adding quality of GDP growth indicator. Next, please. And yes, the question is, what about the economy? What is it? And what is it for? And for whom is it designed? What limited purposes do we grant GDP and other economic indicators? And what are the broader social environmental goals we want to pursue? So most countries where beyond GDP indicators bring to bear have undergone a broad-based deliberation or consultation, like in Wales, for example, or the framework matches the cultural, national, or regional background. And so it demonstrates that it is much more than just technical choice and statistical quality. And so if we are to move from a situation where sustainable well-being indicator initiatives remain peripheral to a situation where they are key to policy making, what you can display, Maria, thank you. Yes, it is a whole set of ingredients that we need to change. So gathering broad-based legitimacy, including these new indicators within powerful policy departments, in economy departments, for example, in budget, policy making, etc. They need to be highly visible, to be backed by political coalitions, to go beyond the optional, to go beyond the unstructured, to appeal to broader intellectual frameworks and narratives that need to make clear that the fears of the social and of ecosystems have like a precedence over economic efficiency or economic performance. Next, please. And so in the current practice, we'll take, for example, this very recent report on the SDGs for Europe. They clearly state that we have difficulties with the last mile. So the last mile in new beyond indicators, beyond GDP indicators, introduction in policy making, we have the biggest difficulties to introduce them and to have them, well, like, change in an impactful way of policy making. So this is, I think, where we are now and what we are specifically researching in our ToBe project task. So armed with plenty of numbers, indicators, indexes, data, and still very little ability to turn them into transformative impact. Next, please. And so all these being said, I must say that it's not, well, my presentation has stressed issues that are not directly related to the nature of the new indicator initiatives, the kind of indicators we need, etc. Because, as I said, we have a lot, and we probably can do with what we have. And a very important part of the question is how to bring them to the fore. But still, I still think that there are so many debates that remain at the confluence of theory, methodology, ethics, and politics, and they remain to be had in as democratic way as possible, like the following. Do we need just one theoretical framework to rule all the European nations, for example? Do we need just one framework, or do we need to have a more bottom-up emergence of theoretical frameworks? We know that it's useful to share a framework. I think that the donut experience demonstrates that, well, it is quite powerful to share a representation, images, symbols, a vocabulary also. But if it's done at the expense of specificity, well, need probably to find a compromise, an equilibrium or a balance. There is also the question of being more holistic, having role-based detailed holistic dashboards versus more focused on impactful leading indicators. And this is another balance we need to strike. And I think there is a last point, yes. And the question related to the quantity of data we are increasingly gathering, and also a theoretical question, really want to document sustainable well-being. Do we need to go to individual profiles, like having profiles of people who are more or less in a well-being state and sustainable at the same time, or an ill-being and unsustainable? So do we need to have profiles, individual or household profiles, or can we still work with averages, like the average of people underemployed or unemployed, or with mental disorders, or with this or that, etc., which is mostly what statistical offices are doing right now, but it also opens the question of to what point do we want to document our situation, and the quantity of data we want and we need in a world with many threats related to personal data. So this is another open question, I think. And I think that it is all. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Philippe. Yeah, that leaves us with a lot of questions about how to think the economy and economics as well. Very interesting discussion, I'm sure. I see some debate going on in the chat, but maybe if you have any questions, let me stop sharing my screen so I can see you and see if there's any questions that you may have. Don't forget to raise your hand. Right, I see Stefano.
Yeah, hi to everyone, first of all. Thank you so much. I think maybe this question is for Philippe, maybe. I think when we speak about like to change about the politician, let's say the party, or like the narrative about that, like how do you think we should change the concept of competitiveness in order to have like, I don't know, at least in the short, medium term, like some changes? How do you see this one in a well-being economy?
Well, this is a very good question, because competitiveness is really one of the leading indicators and concepts when you talk about economic performance. I think it, well, it really should be put at its place. So in a hierarchical thinking, like, well, down the scale, very probably further down the scale, and maybe decompose the concept. What do you mean exactly by competitiveness? Do you mean that the country, the nation, the territory, the region attracts companies? Do you mean that its fiscal policies are attractive, which is maybe not exactly what is required for the greatest welfare of the population, etc. So I think that first we need to decompose it into its bare bone elements, and then maybe keep what's aligned with this view, and well, keep the rest aside, and just go down the hierarchy of the indicators and concepts you put to the fore.
Is there any other questions? See any hands raised? So if it's the case, then I'm gonna ask some questions myself. I want to know how. So we've talked about sufficiency and about sustainable hedonism as a concept. I want to know, how do we put this into practice? How do we promote sufficiency into practice? But also, how does the concept that Ursula introduced about flourishing life, in which we consume less but are happier, how does it come into practice? So I think this question is both for Ursula and for Tuuli.
Who shall start? Tuuli, would you like? Or shall I?
You already started. You can go on, and then I come.
Yeah, I think it's part of our storytelling. It's also kind of, just to reply to the issue of raised in the chat. It's kind of why should we go back to the ancient Greek philosophy? I think there are many approaches in our contemporary psychology and social psychology, which kind of invite for this reflection, for the alternatives. And actually, I think to me a kind of major argument is that it's a kind of invitation to connect to the deepest needs, actually. So also of the needs identified by, for example, the self-determination theory. How can we become more autonomous? How can we become more competent, kind of in a more related, respected, in a kind of loving setting? And lots of ways, because our current strategies for kind of based on material consumption are actually not really, often kind of misguided, or are not meeting our real preferences. Also, it has a literature in behavior economics, and John Harshine also talks about it, that much of our revealed preferences are not our real preferences. So actually, this is an invitation. All this kind of storytelling, it can be on many different levels. It can be a simplistic storytelling, it can be complex science, but it's an invitation of a kind of really connecting to the deepest needs as individuals, as also as a collective, also become more resilient, also more doing what is good for us, and ultimately also questioning much of the cultural norms, partly put by mainstream economics, and also kind of some of our cultures, of also this kind of myth of that much consumption is kind of creates happiness. There is evidence actually in empirical psychology that high consuming individuals who have like high consumption lifestyles tend to have lower well-being. So it's not like that at all. And it's not, and also just as a response to also again to the chat, it's not like a Europe relevant thing only, because there are also the elites in the global south which also have high consuming habits, and to me it's a question of a kind of what are our role models. Also it's also a cultural issue, and also just our strivings to kind of reflect on the values actually, and act coherently. I hope I'm responding, because now it's kind of such a complex thing, so many things come to my mind, so I hope it makes some sense, but I'm happy to pass it on to you, Tuuli.
Yes, thank you. Maybe I start and continue from this striving, because I think what we share very much is the kind of idea and knowledge also from well-being research, that if we strive for better well-being, we would have better outcomes, I think, both in social and biophysical terms. So very much exactly how to put it in practice. I think better well-being can be put in practice by reflecting, by rehearsing, by contemplating what things are important in life. And to add what Ursula said, I could also take Max Neef's theories here and his conceptualizations of violators and preventive satisfiers. So exactly to also pay better attention to what is the role of different goods and services and practices and activities we are engaged in our everyday life, and do they really promote well-being, or do they rather violate other need satisfaction? For example, the problems of work spend cycle, that we are so committed to that we are busy, then we cannot have proper nutrition or whatever. So it's like very much changing and reflecting the everyday practices, but of course there is super important to not be naive and understanding that we can change them with individual actions only. There are certain choices that can be done quite easily, like towards sufficiency, like a plant-based diet, or opting for public transportation or cycling, those kind of things that are synergic. They are better for health and well-being, but also for planet. So those win-win policies win-win behavioral changes can be done to the certain point, but then the structural changes are certainly needed, because as I said, we are trapped in this work spend cycle and treadmill of preference satisfaction. So we have to also change the cultures and ideologies and as drivers, and also the economies and motivation factors, etc. So it's very much from inside out and from outside in, and this kind of transformation towards sufficiency.
Yeah, we have talked about inside out, but I would like to ask also about outside in, like about the policies. You mentioned the need for policies in your presentation. So yeah, what are good examples of these policies that would support sustainable well-being, but also sufficiency?
So maybe the three often mentioned policies now in post-growth discussion, for example, are universal basic services and some kind of job guarantee or basic income to have the financial means for life, or kind of economic security, and care income or basic income. So economic security, there's some kind of policies to secure the financial means for people for subsistence, whether it's a basic income or participatory patient income or care income, or how it's called. And then the universal basic services could provide the kind of platform and societal structures where people can foster and flourish without being taking or violating others. So, but it's very, I don't know. We have also public services, public transportation, and universal healthcare services already taking place in many places, but we also face challenges that are dismantling them. So at least we have to take care of welfare state structures, and they can be very important. But then the problem is that currently their funding, their provisioning is based on growth-based economy. So we also have to create other new means how to organize this welfare provisioning, that it's not dependent on harmful economic growth.
Ursula?
Yeah, I would add two aspects, maybe just kind of underlying this issue of security. There is quite a bit of social psychological research. The lack of sense of security, material and emotional security, is very likely to create kind of a materialist lifestyle of high consumption, and focusing on extrinsic goals rather than connecting to intrinsic and actually being able to act for one's own well-being. So it is actually a collective interest, I would say, to create policies that ensure this kind of sense of basic safety, early life, but also later, in a material and also emotional sense at the school system. So like emotional well-being at schools has a kind of long-term predictor of future performance, even including kind of educational level and earnings. Kind of there are economic studies, longitudinal studies saying that emotional safety itself is kind of a very powerful predictor of future success. This is one point. And the other thing is that public policies can can support green individual choices. So we need the kind of right infrastructure for example, sustainable mobility or kind of energy use. So it's always this collective and policy side needs to be there in the provisioning systems.
Anyone else wants to contribute to this? In that case, there's one question in the comments. It's from Bubakan. He says, my question pertains to measurement. Aside from the Human Development Index, how else do we measure well-being? I'm aware of the wellness report, but is it sufficient? I think probably Philippe or Tuuli would have to answer this.
Well, we mean by well-being. So if you have a very large understanding of well-being, there is also wealth of data, both subjective and objective. So I think that what is implied here in the question is the subjective side of well-being. I'm not an expert of it. You're probably much more Orsoyola and Tuuli. For the rest, you can find multiple deprivation indicators pertaining to all spheres of life, and so you can document objective well-being, objective living standards, etc. in so many ways, with dedicated surveys, etc. So there's a lot of data, a lot of ways of constructing a well-being indicator or dashboard. Yeah, in many ways.
Yes,
Would
maybe
you
I
say-
can continue.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
Tuuli.
it's okay. Both subjective and objective well-being, there are countless measures and indicators and dashboards that have been created, and they are based on different theories and also different terms. And it's sometimes very confusing that the for example, World Happiness Report, it's used the term happiness, but it's also actually their measurement, it's also objective in a sense that it's not only subjective, like how happy you feel you are, but they also measure the corruption or the GDP per capita in their metric. So it's like the word is full of different well-being measures and metrics. That I think there is no lack of them, and maybe lack of those kind of metrics that exactly depicts both what happens in terms of well-being and in terms of biophysical boundaries. So again, I come back to this alignment between these two, because otherwise we cannot address this mismatch if we only follow on the well-being metrics without understanding how they impact, for example, biodiversity or land, how land use changes, how land use is changed, etc. But it's difficult with only one metrics. I know there are composite indexes trying to also follow this. For example, Happy Planet Index was developed quite a long time ago already, and it's been said that it's quite actually good, because it also says that high-income countries are not scoring well in. But if we both take into consideration the happiness level and ecological footprint of countries. But then, of course, yes, developing of composite indexes can be good, but then maybe it's just necessary to somehow develop this kind of dashboard where different indicators are systematically followed, but also then some kind of boundaries or threshold should be established, because now often, for example, with SDGs, we just look and follow how they are developing in time, or like what is the longitudinal development, but we don't look at where they should be. And this comes to the normative goals, like what are the minimum levels of well-being, like what are the minimum thresholds for sufficiency, what is the lowest level of need satisfaction that we aim to, and what is the maximum in terms of biophysical boundaries, but possibly also, and it should be also in terms of social justice. So what kind of energy level is required and justified so that it ensures good life for all within planetary boundaries. So well-being metrics, whenever we measure sustainable well-being, it also should include the understanding of justice, and therefore it's kind of normative concept, and we need principles to guide what are the thresholds and boundaries. And so it's not just about following what's going on, but it's also kind of exercise where we want to be. And therefore it can also guide the economy and other policy making better.
Yeah, just to add on to this, on subjective well-being, I had a table in my presentation, kind of just the main approach is measuring subjective well-being, which is sometimes used as a synonym with happiness, which is a bit kind of sloppy. But anyway, so this is kind of more pragmatic or policy-oriented index perspective. Our SPES project, we did a stock taking, actually looking at the existing indicators, indicator systems or dashboards, kind of using our assessment criteria of what kind of I described of efficiency, participation, security, ecological sustainability, kind of all these dimensions. And what we found is actually very few existing indicator systems meet all of them. So and even with those who seem to kind of partly capture them, they have like quite a bit of methodological shortfall. So despite there is kind of loads of indicators, there is still scope for progress. But you can look at our kind of mapping in our report on our website with all the kind of, I think we did like 45 indicators as a kind of assessed 45 indicators. But our ongoing work is kind of proposing modifications and refine of these existing indicators as well.
And once we have these indicators, strong indicators, because it seems like now there's a lack of indicators that encompass everything that we're looking at today, how do we bring them to the front? How do we make them visible? How do we make them mainstream in economic theory and in economics? I know it's a very complicated question, but maybe someone of you or someone in the audience has a hint as to where to go with this.
I think this is why it's good that we are collaborating with sister projects, because it's like partly it's the methodological soundness, kind of finding something which meets our criteria of both the social minimum and the planetary boundaries, safe and just as well. But the other thing is really kind of what is there a kind of critical mass behind, so to speak, of scientists, of civil society, of policymakers. So I think that's why it's very key to be in dialogue. I don't have a kind of a quick answer to this, but I think this is actually what we are aiming at. And I think Donat is actually kind of doing it kind of pretty well as an approach so far. And we are just kind of now in this. I really see it as a kind of there is so much momentum and so much energy actually going into this kind of. I see ever more events and high scale beyond GDP discussions. So I think kind of this is exactly kind of we need to find, because one of the attractions of GDP is just it's easy and it's already consensual. So we need to have the same thing with something else.
Yes, and if I continue, as one example of what's going on in the field is also a new project or kind of additional project. Now we mentioned ToBe and SPES that have been funded by EU. The European also focus more kind of coordination and support action style of project called Urge. And there we started only early this year, but there our focus is very much to put into action the policies and indicators that are and will be developed in this ongoing research project. And the focus is on this policy outreach and also some kind of building synergies and synthesizing existing initiatives, because the problem is that the beyond GDP field is also growing. There are many different indicators, as Orsoyola mentioned, how many you mapped, and so we aim to shortlist, and we work with national statistic.
Am I the only one who lost Tuuli there? Okay.
Me too.
Me too. If I may just
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. First, just another piece of answer to Philippe would be another so-called sister project has done a mapping of indicators, the WISER project. So you can find a nice map of all, well, maybe not all, but most well-known indicators, and they are in categories. And another point would be that I think something important is not to think of indicators, indicator initiatives that like insulated things or insulated initiatives that are aside and well, if they are to be really impactful, they I think need to be part of the process of a broad-based process, policy-making process, democratic process, normative process, and just with new ways of representing the economy, new ways of thinking about well-being in the economy, new ways of well, giving new meanings, new visual representations, new images, etc. Otherwise, you run the risk of just building something new that will remain peripheral, and it's nice and under a cherry picking mode, like, oh, it's nice, we can use it or not. We can refer to it or we can mention it or not, but it is not like organically part of something broader. And I think that there is a need of connection and organically to put these alternative indicators in, yes, in broad processes, broader processes.
Yeah, I don't know if you finished with what you wanted to say, or if you want to continue with. Okay, in that case, there's another question in the chat from Jonas, who is saying, "What is the role? What do you think is the role of efficiency indicators in, for example, happiness to carbon dioxide emissions or happiness to labor hours per capita? Is this something that, yeah, could be interesting?"
Well, I don't have a definite answer about this, but I would say we already have this. If you take company reports, for example, extra financial reports, they like this kind of indicator, efficiency indicators, so that they can demonstrate that they are improving their operations and etc. But it's just because they are growing their sales and growing their profits. So as a relative number, they are better. But what is needed now is to go beyond this, I think, and to add sufficiency, maybe efficiency kind of indicators and absolute numbers. So as Tuuli said, where are we regarding the targets and regarding a legitimate and science-based targets, I would say, but both science-based and legitimate targets, not just, oh, we are improving or efficiency or green efficiency or environmental efficiency.
Yes, and if I add here, I think that the efficiency indicators can have an important role, because in the end, of course, the overall objective is to achieve maximum, as much well-being as possible with as little environmental impact as possible. Like what is the ratio there, more sustainable ratio, and therefore maybe we have to understand the efficiency. But of course, now the efficiency indicators are often used to only detect the energy efficiency or material efficiency or resource efficiency. They are important as well, but exactly to bring into the notion of what are the well-being impacts with certain amount of resource use. I think those can be quite useful.
Yeah, I agree that it is very important to kind of make kind of an efficient use of our natural and economic and human resources. That's why it's also kind of one of our pillars in SPES, is efficiency. On the other hand, I'm not so sure that it should be kind of linked with happiness as such, because in the kind of variation of happiness, actually kind of, I think it's good to kind of link indicators which have a kind of direct causal relationship. So I'm not so sure about that. But the point is certainly true that actually what we want is that this kind of efficient use of resources increases human capabilities and quality of life ultimately. And that's the discussion actually, how we measure it. Probably it's not just a single indicator of happiness, but like a number of indices. I think this is where the direction of all these measurement projects are going. So it's either an index or a dashboard, as Philippe was also finishing his talk.
Okay, I think we're getting close to the end of the webinar. So I want to ask a question at the end for you to use as closing remarks, if you want to answer it, and if not, you can just say whatever you think needs to be said. How do we plan as an economy for sustainable well-being? How do we get there? What are the steps to get there?
Maybe I can start because it's super big question. And
yes.
But first of all, I start with the word plan. I think this is now more topical in the literature that I'm following. When we look at the history of welfare states, it was a plan. There was a plan. Or if we look at what happened after the Second World War, with the Roosevelt plan and New Deal, there was a kind of big plan, societal plan, how to build better and how to build back and how to increase the well-being in society, but also how to improve economic growth, of course, and increase the economic growth. So it was and it's kind of social plan. There was a paradigm of social planning at that time. So very much a kind of trust on top-down decision making, and it was quite bureaucratic also in welfare states, how the welfare state institutions were put in practice and developed. But anyway, there was a kind of overall plan how can we make this. And now with the more neoliberal economies and more maybe deliberative democracy, participative democracies, and for good reasons, the criticism towards top-down approach, we've more or less avoided these kind of grand plans. But I think now with this time and with the urgency we are facing, urgency to transform quickly towards sustainability and 1.5 degree crossing the limits of global warming, we should plan, because we cannot leave this transformation for individuals or market actors. There is a huge, of course, consensus on that, and also policy actors and international treaties are struggling. So we need to have more kind of general planning perspective here. But then how to make that, how to avoid those flaws that took place in the welfare state construction era. So emphasis should be in democracy, of course. So again, we have to take care of democratic principles and participation, intersectional justice, social justice, so that people can follow the transformation and no one is left behind, as said in just transition literature and EU Green Deal. So it would require kind of big plan, but then how to combine that people can participate. And there also, I personally think that this kind of compass of sustainable well-being as a vision can work and help the transformation and planning, because it sets the boundaries, it sets the targets, it's related to people's own need satisfaction, it's kind of personal in that sense, and it can be used at the local level as a kind of map or compass towards sustainable well-being. So I would actually think that with normative principles and with more concrete thresholds and kind of levels of well-being, we could create this kind of plan.
I would like to follow up from here. I think planning, I fully agree that it's necessary, but at the same time, we also kind of need to make sure that we are navigating in an uncertain environment. Kind of there could be kind of crisis situations, uncertainties. So it's also our skills to navigate in this uncertainty, being flexibility, being resilient is a key element here. And what is actually, I think, a kind of a point which is shared by all of us, all of our presentations, is a kind of more kind of a greater focus on the normative nature of economics, of our science, of our actions. So what are the value choices, the ethical choices behind? Don't pretend that it's all neutral. We need to be more kind of more clear about these values, these normative choices, and we have to have kind of good discussions on what is the life, what is the future we want to create. And thirdly, it is a collective process. So I think we need to move beyond this individual approach or this kind of also this dichotomy that there is the state, there is the market, and there are the individuals. Just to kind of be aware that it's a multi-actor process where it's a kind of collective value creation. So that's why this literature on commons is very important. So we are creating collectively this value. So I think this is a major paradigm change. So the state is not correcting market failures, but it has a kind of there is this added value of commons here.
And finally, Philippe, I don't know if you want to add to this.
No, I fully agree with Orsoyola and ToBe, and I'm happy to let anyone willing to contribute for the 5 last minutes.
Yeah. Is there anyone else in here willing to share some discussion points, questions, last remarks? In that case, I would like to remind you that this is a webinar series and that we have 2 upcoming webinars in the next 2 months. One on the 23rd of April, in which we will discuss the discussions on the EU Green Deal and the upcoming elections. And then one on the 29th of May, in which we will discuss local examples in the world. This meeting is being recorded and it will be posted online on social media, but also on our website. We will send you an email and you can also continue. If you're not registered to the webinar series, you can register there, and we will also send you the link to the next webinars. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a nice rest of your afternoon.